Indonesia's reported consideration of acquiring 7 Type 053H frigates from China has drawn regional attention not because of the ships themselves, but because of what they represent strategically. The Type 053H, known by NATO as the Jianghu class, is a legacy platform designed in the late 1970s and built through the 1980s. On its technical merits, it belongs to an earlier era of naval warfare. Yet, its potential transfer to Indonesia could reshape maritime perceptions in Southeast Asia, particularly from the viewpoint of the Philippines. The Type 053H is modest in displacement, around 2,000 tons, with legacy propulsion, outdated radar, and weapon systems that are survivable mainly in low-threat environments. These frigates were never intended for peer-level naval conflict or modern anti-access operations. They were designed for coastal tasking, enforcing presence, policing waters, performing surface engagements with basic missiles and guns. In today's sensor-saturated maritime battle space, with anti-ship missiles, UAV reconnaissance, and electronic warfare systems rapidly proliferating, Type 053H vessels would be vulnerably exposed. They are not platforms of finesse. They are platforms of numbers. This is exactly why Indonesia is considering them. The Indonesian archipelago spans a maritime domain so vast that its requirement for hulls, not advanced hulls, just hulls, is immense. The concept that quantity is a capability becomes apparent when protecting thousands of islands, tracking illegal fishing, escorting commercial traffic, and flag showing across an enormous exclusive economic zone. A fleet with too few ships, even if modern, forfeits presence. In this sense, old frigates can fill a useful role as maritime gap fillers, allowing more advanced vessels such as the Martadinata class, the future I-class, and the Merah Putih class to be concentrated around flashpoints and strategic choke points. For China, the transfer of Type 053H ships is not primarily a military decision. It is a geopolitical one. These frigates are decommissioned assets whose operational value to the Chinese Navy has long expired. But as instruments of influence, they are far from valueless. If Indonesia accepts them, China gains a degree of embedded military technical presence in Indonesian naval infrastructure, spare parts, maintenance programs, training pipelines, and vendor dependencies. This creates an institutional familiarity with Chinese systems that can pave the way for further cooperation. The ships themselves may not be deadly weapons, but they can serve as Trojan horses of strategic proximity. From Jakarta's perspective, the purchase would not define Indonesia's naval identity, but rather supplement it. Indonesia's procurement strategy in recent years has emphasized diversification, submarines from South Korea, frigate development with the United Kingdom and Turkey, exploratory industrial cooperation with Japan, discussions with Italy regarding major warships, and now potential transfers from China. Indonesia clearly seeks not alignment but optionality. It purchases from many suppliers, thereby refusing strategic exclusivity. But diversification has a cost. The fleet becomes a logistical mosaic, integrating Polish, Turkish, Korean, Chinese, and European-based systems, multiplies training requirements, and strains ammunition and spare parts supply chains. For the Philippines, observing this development invites both reassurance and unease. On one hand, a larger Indonesian fleet, even if composed partly of older ships, can provide stronger coverage in shared maritime trouble spots, particularly in the Sulu-Celebes corridor where piracy, militant transit, smuggling routes, and unregulated fishing persist. With more Indonesian hulls at sea, joint patrols could increase, enforcement presence could intensify, and the maritime policing burden could be shared rather than borne disproportionately by Manila. On the other hand, there is a strategic trust dimension. The Philippines faces direct confrontation with China in the West Philippine Sea. Its patrol vessels, radar feeds, and communications increasingly integrate with United States and Japanese defense networks. If Indonesian naval platforms sourced from China begin to operate alongside Philippine vessels, questions naturally arise. Could Chinese origin systems collect metadata? Could maintenance personnel gain indirect access to operations patterns? Could China benefit from secondary channel visibility into Philippine operational behavior? Even if these risks are limited or controllable, their perception influences political and defense policy choices. At a deeper level, the Type 053H proposal embodies contrasting philosophies. The Philippines has pursued quality over quantity, building a small navy with selective advanced capabilities. The Jose Rizal-class frigates, the shore-based BrahMos missile system, and expanding sensor integration with allies. Its presence is focused and defensive, calibrated for specific confrontation scenarios with China. Indonesia's approach is more distributed and autonomous. Maximize vessel numbers, patrol the vast archipelagic domain, and maintain strategic ambiguity regarding China, while cultivating partnerships with multiple defense suppliers. Looking ahead to the years between 2028 and 2035, several scenarios are plausible. If Indonesia does acquire the Type 053H ships and successfully refurbishes them, its maritime presence would expand dramatically in raw coverage terms. This would affect not only the Philippines, but also Malaysia, Singapore, and Australia, as a more visibly active Indonesian navy asserts presence over regional sea routes. Alternatively, the ships may prove expensive to maintain, suffering mechanical failures and electronics degradation, rendering them partially inactive. In that scenario, the transfer becomes less a military asset than a fiscal liability, and a political reminder that cheap ships are never truly cheap. For Manila, the strategic lesson is sharp. Dependence on modern but few vessels carries different constraints than dependence on older but plentiful ones. The Philippines must consider whether a fleet of small, numerous offshore patrol vessels could complement its high-end assets, ensuring presence without risking expensive hulls in low-priority waters. At the same time, Manila should continue cultivating partnerships with Japan, Australia, the United States, South Korea, and possibly India to avoid any temptation toward accepting second-hand systems from China. The Philippines enjoys the credibility of being fully outside the Chinese supplier ecosystem. That credibility is an advantage not to be traded away. Finally, the Indonesia-Philippines naval relationship must carefully navigate the dual challenge of cooperation and differentiation. Cooperation demands information sharing, presence coordination, and operational alignment. Differentiation demands safeguarding national security sensitivities and recognizing that Indonesia's flexible neutrality toward China and the Philippines' assertive resistance to China are not contradictions, but complementary strategic roles in Southeast Asia's maritime equilibrium. In this sense, whether Indonesia accepts Type 053H frigates or not, the Philippines' most important posture is one of steady modernization, transparent alignment with trusted defense partners, and a nuanced collaboration with Indonesia built upon trust, not uniformity.